Hey everyone, this is just a quick video I'm making regarding a new Facebook group that I've created called Single Issue Intactivism. And this may be considered a little bit of an extension of what I called Intactivism, which is to say that I fully endorse a lot of approaches to raising awareness of this issue that other people find to be non-aesthetic, ugly perhaps, maybe even evil. I've been called all kinds of awful names, and mostly I think it's quite funny. But so what is single issue intactivism? Hopefully it's obvious enough. It's the idea that I'm going to be a single issue voter, and my one issue is, does this person oppose the cutting of infant males? And when I say oppose, are they actually seriously promoting some sort of change? Whether it's a stronger law or whether it's some new mechanism for ensuring that people actually enforce the laws that are on the books, which, would state that these people are violating the Hippocratic Oath and should be, frankly, put in jail. If it were up to me, it'd be death camps, or that's not a secret. I think that people who rape and mutilate infants, I think they should be sold to the deep web. I don't understand why that's considered such an extreme or radical stance. Like, people will say all the time, oh, let's, round up all the pedophiles and murder them. And I'm like, okay, let's start with the ones who rape babies with knives. Those are the worst pedophiles of all, right? But no, because Abrahamics. So, but there's a lot of different ways to look at things, once you kind of set the scene here, right? There are no politicians in America that make a hard stance against what is, in fact, obviously, demonstrably, in just raw numbers, the most prolific and horrific form of sexual violence, really violence, period, allowed in America, and in the West in general. And they're silent on it. And I think there's not an excuse for this. So, therefore, all American politicians and all of their voters are rape apologists. And when I say that they're rape apologists, we could start, for example, with that term as it's meant in the conventional sense, right? A feminist will accuse someone of being a rape apologist if they engage in victim blaming or something like that. Well, the kind of accusation I'm making is far worse, because these people are apologists for first rape and then mutilation. It's just, there's absolutely no comparison. So therefore, if you vote, and you vote for somebody who hasn't made this their number one issue, well, why are you voting for them? You're telling them something else is more important to you. And honestly, I think that that's the definition of a rape apologist. When any number of these other political issues, you think that's more important to you than preventing babies from being raped with knives. Because frankly, realistically, the government's not going to get any smaller. It's not going to get any less invasive. Everybody's celebrating Texas going back to the same socialist shithole it was a year ago. But it's relatively not a shithole that's socialist compared to all the other socialist shitholes surrounding it, right? It's just a special Olympic standard. America's fucked. The empire is ending. So if you're going to look to politics for anything, realistically, you could see an end to the forced genital cutting of males. Hopefully. Because it's too hard to defend these days. Every single person who tries to defend it just embarrasses themselves. And we're seeing an increase in feminists who have to realize that, that they are realizing that they have to pretend to care about this issue. And this is the next part of it, right? So the first thing is, we should form a voting bloc of people who all say, you're not getting these votes, you're not getting this support because you're a rape apologist, you condone genital mutilation of infants, you're running cover for the world's most notorious pedophiles, right? So therefore I'm not going to vote for you. Secondly, if you did do something about this, here's potentially, if it blows up, if it ends up being a fairly large subsection of intactivists, maybe that tips the scale. Eventually people say, oh, well, shit, there's a block here and they're refusing to vote unless I say something. And shit, I get all kinds of people from like intactivisms span every single political ideology. because it's such a no-brainer issue. It draws in everyone. It's just the moment you think about it, the moment that then you start to agree. There's no other requirement at all. So there's that. But then the third thing is that rhetorically, it's highlighting the lack of urgency surrounding this issue. Because what I've noticed is that a lot of people are perfectly content to just state online, well, I'm opposed to this, right? They state their opposition and that's that. But what they don't seem to realize is that they're going to be going up against people who are fanatically in favor of it, right? And frankly, it needs a fanatical reaction. When a person says they're defending it or that they're going to do this to their son, it needs to be on the table that they'll be called a rapist, that they'll be called a child abuser, that it will be documented, that maybe in 18 years we'll find their son and we'll send them their post that they made on social media about how proud they were that they did this, and all of the people who warned them and how they did nothing. And the reason, of course, for doing that is to put that threat in the mind of the parent, because they don't respond to the screams of their newborn. They don't respond to the fact that their newborn is in harm or in pain. They don't respond to the fact that they're making a permanent, irreversible choice for their newborn. They care so little about the well-being of their newborn that they don't even look into this issue. They have no idea how the procedure is done, and they just literally do nothing. And then, of course, regret parents come out of the woodwork and they say, "Oh, I'm a victim too because I was tricked." And I've never found that particularly compelling, especially because I've heard of precisely zero regret parents that have maybe had themselves cut in solidarity, right? Like that would be a regret parent that I believe they're actually sorry about what they've done. As far as I can tell, they're just kind of trying to avoid being seen in a negative light. And that's what I'm getting at, is that generally speaking, parents seem to be viewing their children as utilities to increase their status in society. And therefore, they're only going to respond to incentives that are directly related to their personhood and their reputation. It's not about their son. Their son could die and they don't give a shit. We tell them that all the time. Your son can end up dead. And frankly, I do think that a group of Intactivists should do what the Westboro Baptist Church does. If parents decide to cut their child and their child ends up dead, we should protest the funeral. Protest the funeral and tell them you did this and it's your fault. Now maybe you should kill yourself or whatever the suggestion may be. And again, it's because the consequences need to be brought to the parents, because this is happening, okay? To take a moderate approach, to sit there and do nothing, to do anything short of what's radical, at least in terms of your rhetoric and your advocacy and the things you're saying, to do anything short of that is to doom countless infant males, because this is going to continue to happen just statistically, we know. And what I've noticed is that it's particularly rare to see women who have any sense of urgency regarding this. And this is why I make the comparison. I say every time, infant males are the primary victims of sexual violence in America. Women don't like hearing that. They don't like hearing that genital mutilation is worse than rape. You have to break it down from them. Penetration involuntarily with a penis, on one hand, versus with a series of instruments, including probes and knives, right? It's, I am willing to state it. It's an ugly thing to have to really lay out there and discuss, right? But it's undeniable. It's just undeniably, obviously true. Yet, a lot of these women, they don't want to hear that, because their rights are already guaranteed. They're already protected from violence, including sexual violence. They already get to accuse people and have them thrown in jail and to have laws that protect them. They don't know what it's like to simply be abused and the law can do nothing, and that's that. And when I say abused, I mean having part of your genitals cut off. I don't mean someone grabbed your ass in a bar or even just being raped. Honestly, walk in the park compared to genital mutilation. So that comparison needs to be made because we have to prioritize and we have to make that clear. What's happening right now is something that needs to be dealt with a sense of urgency. So I'm going to share a little bit of a conversation I had with this woman named Svetlana from Sweden, because she had some issue. She had some problems with what I had to say to her. So I don't know. Maybe you can let me know. Am I being an asshole? Am I just like a really, really awful, mean person? Maybe am I being an asshole is the wrong question. Is my being an asshole a bad thing? I guess is more precisely what I mean. But let's see here. Oh, I think she blocked me. So I don't believe that I can see it anymore. Oh well. Well, it's probably for the best. The gist of it, though, is that she says, oh, it's so ridiculous that this continues. And I reminded her, this continues because the victims are male. And she responds that she used to be on that victimhood stuff, and she used to say the same thing about women, but now she knows better. Now, this is an incredibly ignorant and insulting and stupid thing to say, right? Because women's issues generally aren't real, not compared to men's issues. You know, we can make the T-chart, we can compare them. It's trivial, it's obvious. So she was deceived into thinking that she was oppressed as a woman because she was too lazy to look into the facts, and then she realized she was wrong. So then when I have a legitimate issue as a man, she just assumes, oh, you're just doing the same thing that I was doing. No, bitch. No. And, you know, I corrected her and explained the basis for what I was stating, and she said, well, you're just playing the victim and blah, 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 you know? And it's like, you could just let the comment go, right? Instead, she chooses to make an equivocation between her experience and mine. And I told her to go fuck herself because that's the proper thing to tell someone in that situation. But women they tend to not be very emotionally intelligent, and therefore they need this explained to them. They have to understand that there are people who have experienced worse victimization than them, and that they've basically been in a situation where all of their rights were guaranteed based on a comparison, based on a comparative claim about the nature of the genders and how one is oppressing the other, or one is at least being oppressed, right? And that's not true. But then when it's true in reverse, now all of a sudden we're not allowed to make those comparative things, and anybody who does so is the victim. And it's so fucking tiresome. It's really just the union of anti-feminism with feminism, and it's all gynocentric bullshit. I also want to comment on Rand Paul's recent questioning of Rachel Levine, where he was condemning genital mutilation. What's very interesting about that, as I pointed out on my most recent podcast, is that everything he says about genital mutilation is gender neutral, as he's listing them, with the only exception being who condemns one versus the other. In terms of who perpetrates it, how harmful it is, how prevalent it is, things like that. There's a lot of very valid comparisons and parallels to be made, such that there was never any reason to gender this issue. But of course, feminists decided to do that and deliberately excluded male victims. And therefore, the women's movement is responsible for the most prolific and horrific form of sexual violence that occurs in the West today. And that's why, I guess you could call this a purity spiral. I think that it's not quite enough to just be against it. I think that this is an issue where you can be against it, and we can make it clear that this is occurring because the victims are male, and that there's a problem fundamentally with empathy. Because frankly, if you're a regret parent, you were like tricked or whatever, you didn't think about it, you were ignorant. I mean, I'm sorry, but these excuses are very, very weak. You can make the case, sure, that it'd be great if doctors weren't being so pushy or whatever. They didn't have those incentives in place, right? But fundamentally, we're relying on the world to not rape and mutilate infant boys, when what we should be relying on is parents to protect them. And it seems to just be a presumption that parents will do nothing to protect their children, if those children are male. So I think there do need to be voices within an intactivist community that are pointing this out. That very often people are trying to recontextualize this issue as a women's issue. They're trying to make it all about the regret moms and how they're the real victims. And they try to argue that the fact that this is still legal is in no way an indictment of feminism or the women's movement. And I think that's incredibly evil and despicable. I think that every single person who identifies themselves as a supporter of the women's movement should answer for male genital mutilation in the West. Because you've taken public resources, you've claimed to be the experts in sexual violence, and yet you've done nothing to prevent this. Absolutely nothing. And in my experience, whenever I do see feminists discussing this issue, the very first thing they do is couch it in how they don't want to offend anybody's religious beliefs, which is frankly idiotic. All you're saying is that children of that religious denomination should not be protected, which ironically means that you're actually opposed to the general welfare and the rights of people of that religious group, so long as the perpetrators are also members of that group. So anyway, anybody watching my channel is familiar with these arguments. There's not a whole lot new here, but I just want to kind of reiterate and dress up my stance on radical advocacy in regards to intactivism. So if someone says that they're voting, ask them why they're voting for a rape apologist. Maybe just to start a conversation. I guess you don't have to be that abrasive if you don't think it's gonna turn out well. But maybe consider it, you know. I just think it's fucking precious that all these conservatives are pretending that now all of a sudden they care about genital integrity because a bunch of tween girls with terrible parents decided to troon out and become NBs or whatever. And now all of a sudden the conservatives have to like circle the wagons and then pretend they care about genital integrity. But of course they're going to find a way to exclude, actual victims, many of which are things that they've perpetrated themselves. So they're absolute fucking hypocrites for pretending to even care about this. So yeah, I'm clearly a ray of fucking sunshine today. Thanks for indulging me. If you're on Facebook, I'd appreciate anybody joining the group. If you agree with that message, if you're somebody who says, yeah, you're right. If I vote, I have to vote for a rape apologist, and I'm not going to do that. I think it's a pretty airtight, solid argument, and I'd be curious to hear what you think. So, yeah, have a nice day.